Okay, hello and welcome to the Michael Mamas Show. I'm your host, Michael Mamas, and we're coming to you from Mount Soma, USA, home of the Sri Someshwara Temple in the mountains of Western North Carolina. Today we're going to talk about, I forget where I first heard this, but I went online and there's a lot about it, about Harvard University, and they elected as the chief chaplain. I guess they're like, at least in one of the things I read, there are 65 chaplains associated, affiliated, maybe they're professors or whatever at Harvard. And they all vote to elect the chief chaplain. And the guy they elected is an atheist. And there's a lot I could say about that. I think the first thing I would say, well, first, obviously, it's not along the lines of my thinking, but at the same time, I have a certain amount of empathy for that. I can kind of understand it. And so it's not just even that group, though. It's pretty much another pandemic, if you will, that's kind of permeating our nation and the world these days. And so I think a lot of people they can't buy religion. And I've said in previous podcasts how I like listening to these Christian radio stations when I'm driving my car and the things they say, because on the surface level, and this is how I'm empathetic with these chaplains, on the surface level, what they're saying, it just makes sense. And what these sermons on these Christian radio, and not just Christian, but all the different religions are saying, it's like, man, if you just take it on face value, it doesn't make any sense. But what I have found is that there's a deeper meaning to those words. And to me, that deeper meaning has just been lost. To the vast majority of people who are atheists, non-believers, and also to many people that, deeply believe in God. And I thought I'd go through a few of those. Well, one was interesting, with the world, the way it's in such chaos and it's such a mess now. And, we talk about the border, we talk about China, we talk about North Korea, and, the whole list of things. And one evangelist I saw, this was actually on a television commercial, he said, the only way out of the whole mess that we're in is through God. And, on face value, I can really understand how that atheist chaplain, perhaps, or, so many people in the world who've turned their back on religion, they hear that and they say, well, what does that mean? Is some guy named God there? And if we appeal to him, he'll fix the whole thing? Or, just what does it mean? And they just can't buy it. And I mean, on face value, I have a certain amount of empathy for that. I can understand that. But the thing is that what happened, I think, is that, well, first of all, until very recently, it made no sense, which I find interesting. It's because people just through feeling, they feel it in their heart that there's, a higher being or whatever you want to call it. And they're so devoted to that. I mean, they built these huge temples and labor to do it. So there's kind of like an inner knowing, even though there's no real ability to, explain it logically. So I think that's, what even these chaplains are missing is they don't see the human mind, that we have a right and a left brain. We are logical. And we also have deep feeling. We feel into things. We sense things. And really, our evolution, our growth, a big part of our growth is about the integration of the heart and the mind. And for a long time, the intellect kind of was a place that we just let it kind of go to sleep when we got religious or spiritual. And it got to the point then where, well, it's through God. And yeah, okay. But, what does that mean? Well, now with deep understanding, it's also in modern physics. There's the understanding. There's a unified field. There's a basis for all existence. It's a source of all the intelligence, harmony, coherence that birthed this incredible universe. And it is the source of everything. It's the source of you. It's the source of me. It's that place deep inside our being where we're one with everything. And it's the source of all the intelligence and harmony that created and sustains this whole universe. And if we can tap into that level of our being, to whatever degree we can tap into that level of our being and let it well up through us and through all of humanity, coherence, harmony, all the problems in the world, we become more intelligent, we become wiser, and our actions become more responsible and more in harmony with nature. And what is that one thing? Well, from an objective perspective, as an object, it's the unified field. But that's not enough. I mean, objectively, what am I? I'm a bunch of protons, electrons, and neutrons. But that's not how you relate to me. It's true, but that's not how you relate to me, because what I really am is the personified correlate. And like that, there's a personified correlate to the unified field. And that is what we call God, And so turns out, yeah, this guy, he's right. The way out of the mess is through God. If we could just bring more coherence and intelligence and harmony and wisdom into life of all the people, everything would just straighten out. And so many things. Like, for example, they talk about faith, have faith in God, or have faith. Do you have faith? Do you believe in God? It's based on faith, belief, faith. I don't buy it. From the feeling level, the heart level, yeah, we can sense into that there's something there. But see, the heart and the mind work together, and one supports the other. One also helps clarify any distortion in the other, any superstition that might creep in. And so when we start to have the ability to use the intellect, the mind, and integrate that with the feeling, we separate the wheat from the chaff. All the superstition and stuff melts away. And also, probably in this day and age, maybe even as importantly, is that we start to develop a rationale and understanding that makes sense, because we live in an age where things have to make sense. And just to say, well, I have faith, I mean, to a rigorously analytical, scientifically minded person, faith? I mean, are you kidding? You're going to have faith? You're just going to, because it almost implies blind faith. And it just doesn't work for people. So what we really need is, and it's so available, it's so radically available. I mean, this is what I teach in my classes. I mean, it's years I can lecture about this in perpetuity. There's so much knowledge, which is why I like the Vedic tradition, because there's certainly the feeling level and all about the personified aspects of God, but there's also a very incredibly rigorous scientific, if you will, understanding, reasonable understanding, logical understanding, that all comes together into this unified whole that makes so much sense that now you get to the point where it's not based on faith. It's based on knowledge that the heart has, and also knowledge that the mind has. And then so many things like trust in the Lord. What does that mean? Trust in the Lord? The Lord will take care of me, or whatever. Well, now we understand that there's that deeper level of intelligence and harmony and coherence and wisdom. And by trust in that, we mean we can rest into that. We can rely upon that. We can find that within our own being. And that sorts out so much. It provides us with the intelligence, the wisdom, and all like that. And then there's other things like eye for an eye. on one level, it's like eye for an eye. Are you kidding? What does that mean? But the deeper understanding of that is this idea of karma, this idea of cause and effect. For every action, there's an equal but opposite reaction. That's just basic physics, you know. Uh, uh, and that's a law of nature. And if you want to speak in terms of God, it's God's will is that He created this universe that's a causal universe. For reaction, there's an equal but opposite reaction, an eye for an eye. But there's also, see, the other facet of that, and this comes right out of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle in physics, that there is free will, and free will can affect that. And the more you're in line with that deeper level of being, that source of harmony and coherence, that one thing that's a source of everything, that is a field of infinite possibility, of freedom, infinite freedom. And so now, yeah, there's cause and effect, eye for an eye, but there's also free will. And those two things are like two aspects of God's will, you see? So then things start to make sense. The whole idea of being born again. Well, we can understand being born again on different levels. Are we born again because we have an emotional upheaval? Or what does born again really mean? Well, in the Vedic tradition, there's this temple I went to in the Himalayas. It's called Jageshwara, and there's like 108 temples there, I guess, and small, but all together in a cluster like. And I went into not all of them, but a number of them. And the idea then is that there are 108 different awakenings, levels of awakening to what? To your true nature, which is what? Divine nature, which is what? The unified field, which is what? God. That's what it means. God dwells within. We're all one with God, you see? And it's physics. But to relate to it as physics again, only is not good, because the personified value is what really gives it meaning. They asked Einstein, can you explain a sunrise in terms of pure physics? He says, yes, you can, but if you do, it loses its meaning. But nevertheless, to understand the physics deepens our understanding, particularly when we start talking about things like the unified field. Is Jesus the only way? Well, that's another one. What does that mean? Jesus is the only way? You mean before Jesus was born, nobody went to heaven? But if you mean by Jesus the Christ, and if you mean by the Christ, you mean the unified field, now it makes sense. Why? Because there's only one unified field. It's the one thing that's the source of everything. And it's the only way of awakening to your deeper nature. So again, we start to get an understanding so that it's not like, well, if you're not this denomination or whatever of this religion or that, then, you're out of luck. No, it's understanding the deeper mechanics that underlies all these different religions. And there's so much like that. There's so much like that. And once you get onto, the basic premise of this, the basic understanding of this, and start working with it. And that's why in my classes, I go at it from different angles, explain this, like that, like that. At some point, there's different levels of awakening. And it's like the light bulb goes off. It's like, oh yeah, it does make sense. And isn't it so much better to have both the heart and the mind component? And now when we get into an emotional thing, if it's in distortion, we have a rational ability to say, hey, you know what? Some of that is just superstition. We have to be humble about it because the knowledge is deep. But there is an understanding that's there. They talk about Christ, and if you look at language, they talk about Krishna. Christ and Krishna, are, from a linguistic perspective, are both derived from the same thing. And Jesus, it's actually quite beautiful. Lord Jesus, in the New Testament was all written in ancient Greek originally. And Jesus means, in ancient Greek, it means the healer. Now, isn't that interesting? Because we're not just talking about healing, a cut. We're talking about healing of the awareness, healing of one's being, healing on all levels of one's existence. And what heals that? Waking into your own true nature, waking into that source of the coherence and harmony, what in the Vedic tradition they would call Bala, life force, and allowing that life force to well up in greater levels of purity. And that's what heals. I think I mentioned in one of my podcasts that I had a good friend, a Chinese doctor. He was famous. He was old at the time he's passed away, but he once said to me, "I don't deal with disease." He said, "I deal with health, bring out more health." And that's what a healer is, and that's what the Christ is. It's that level that is the source of all health. Now, I've talked about the phase transition, and that we're in a time of phase transition from an age of, just look what's going on in the world, all the conflict and terrible things. We're in that period of transition now into a golden age, an age of wisdom, you see. And I think a lot of people kind of focusing these days, understandably, on, the border or, China or the virus or, all these current event things that are just seem so, how are we going to sort this out and what's going to happen to our world? But the transition is going to happen everywhere. It's a phase transition to a golden age. And I've talked about how when you take water and you cool it down, once it gets to 32 degrees, as it cools down, it gets more coherent, the molecules and everything. And then at 32 degrees, once it gets colder and it transitions into ice, it becomes crystalline, which is a lot of coherence in its structure. But there's a period right at that transition moment. It's called a phase transition, where it goes from water to ice. It's a period of tremendous chaos. That's where we are now. And I don't think you have to be a nuclear physicist to figure that out. Just watch the news. We are in a period of ridiculous chaos, really. But if we have a deeper understanding, if we can take a look back, it's a phase transition that permeates everything, including spirituality, including religion. The head chaplain, the chief chaplain of Harvard University, is an atheist. I mean, I think I explained how I understand that and how I get it, but my goodness, that's right up there. Well, I don't know if I want to. I was going to say that's right up there with God is dead. Are you kidding me? That's like saying, the unified field is the stuff the universe is made out of. It's, and even if you look at the manifestation of existence from the perspective of modern physics, it dwells beyond space, beyond time. In that sense, it's eternal. And so the idea that it could even die is just ridiculous, But again, we need a deeper understanding of these things. And in that way, it starts to make sense, And then they talk about, actually, there's a cute quote that I got out of the Bible I kind of liked, Mark 10:15. "Verily I say unto you, whosoever shall not receive the kingdom of God as a little child, he shall not enter therein." What does that mean? A little child? Are we supposed to be like, oh, no? What that means is that, when you think of children, then one reason we just love them, little babies, and so they're completely unprogrammed. They're completely not identified with this perspective or that perspective. And that's in the state of where you're really one with God. What are you one with? You're one with that source of all perspectives. That source is open. That source aligns with a perspective, not because they've been indoctrinated into that perspective, but because on a feeling level, from a level of wisdom, from a level of intelligence, it's the perspective that best serves the moment. That's what it means to be as a little child, you see? And so again, we look at these quotes, they make no sense, but if we understand this, it all starts to make sense. Tremendous sense, And that's one reason I really like the Vedic knowledge, is because it goes into such deep rigor of the understanding of all of this. And it's such a profound knowledge. handed down from the rishis, fabulous. It provides a rational understanding, but it also makes the heart sing, So this idea, once you get onto this, then this idea of, do you believe in God or are you an atheist? Do you believe in God? Well, at one point, once the understanding becomes deep enough and rigorous enough and complete enough, not just the heart feeling, but also the mind, the intellectual understanding, that question, do you believe in God? I mean, that's like saying, do you believe in arithmetic? I mean, arithmetic just is. I mean, it's just, it's an understanding. It's not something based on faith, It's perfectly logical and irrefutable. 2 + 2 = 4. Do you believe in 2 + 2 = 4? I mean, come on. And so it becomes like that. So in one sense, then, we could say that spirituality, religion, faith in God, if you will, starts to become a matter of how clearly you can articulate the underlying mechanics of the whole thing, the mechanics of creation, you see? And then so many questions that people have, the answers just start to fall in your lap, not based on faith, but it's just reasonable, And see, that's why I built Mount Soma. That's why we're building Mount Soma. There's a technology, and it's technology. Prayer, you could say, is a technology. But there are different levels of prayer. And it has the function to do with how fully integrated prayer is, not just with the heart, but also with the mechanics of creation. And that's where this whole thing about, mantras and yajnas and pujas and meditation and all these things, it's just completely consistent, but just offers a deeper understanding of the actual mechanic of prayer. And as the mechanic becomes more in harmony with the nature of life and the nature of existence, it becomes more powerful. And I call it Brahmamaya, Vishwakarma, the architecture of the universe. We start to understand the architecture of the universe, and within that knowledge is an understanding of how to architecturally construct what they call an enlightened city, a place. And that's what we're building at Mount Soma, a place that radiates that value out to the whole environment, purifies the atmosphere, awakens people just by its very presence in operation to deeper and deeper levels of their own being, their own awareness. We're going through a phase transition. It's not that we're necessarily going to have even new thoughts, but it's going to be a whole new way of thinking, a wiser way of thinking, a deeper way of thinking, a way of thinking that is in harmony with nature. And if you want to say, in harmony with God. And now, hopefully, an atheist, if they really listen to what we just said, to say in harmony with God isn't something that, how can you prove God? But it's an understanding of the scientific perspective of what God is. That's what's happening. We're in that phase transition right now. It's permeating religion. Spiritual leaders are atheists. It's all going to change for the better. And I'll tell you, a lot of people who are contacting me and saying, oh, the world is so terrible. What's going to happen? We're terrified. We're afraid to move. People are afraid they're going to have a heart attack. And should we move out of, a number of people have written me and said, should we move out of California? It just seems crazy, things will be better. You have to act wisely and intelligently to get through this period of time. But it's not going to last forever. And I'd say in less than a few years, you're going to see huge changes. It could even happen in a few months, but we're going to see huge changes to a golden age. This is the phase transition. And I have been predicting this and lecturing about this. And where did I get that? Well, it's in the Jyotish, it's in the numerology, it's in the Veda, and it's also just in common sense if you just look at what's going on. This cannot continue. It's just too nuts what's going on in the world today on so many levels, everywhere you look. It's just too crazy. It will change, and it will change fast, you know? And that's what we're about. And with Mount Soma, it facilitates the transition to come about more quickly, more smoothly, and more harmoniously. You know, if we approach this phase transition period really, really wrong, and then you're talking Armageddon. If we approached it really wisely and had this unified field generators built, Mount Somas like that, it would have just been smooth as silk. Now we're something in between. It's chaotic. We all know that. But it's going to be fine. And I'm not just saying that because of my experiences now. It's something we've known for decades. I've been lecturing about for decades. And here it is, just like I said, you know. And it's not about giving me all this credit because I just studied the Jyotish. I studied the teachings from the Veda, and it's just right there. It's nothing new. It's just the people that, I guess, it slipped through the fingers, you see. All right, Scotty, I know Adrian's not with us today because she's at her son's university. It's Parents' Day, I guess. But do you have anything you want to add, Scotty?
No, I think you did a good job of covering that.
Yeah, I think we pretty much covered it, you know. Oh, you know, they talk about, I guess, these atheist chaplains or whatever talk about moral fiber. And they teach more about moral fiber and morality than, you know, religion. Well, where does moral fiber come from? It comes from resting into the divinity in your own being, that source of infinite harmony and wisdom. That's the source of morality, you know. All right, I guess that does it then. If there's nothing else, Scotty, we will close for today and we'll talk with you all again next week. Thanks for listening.